gosh, you guys, I'm so excited for you all to watch and listen to this episode of My World with Stories. You may know him best as an actor and Broadway veteran, but you may know him more so as Doody from the 1978 classic Grease. Yes, a Grease legend is on the podcast today, and I couldn't have been more honored to interview and to talk to the legend himself, Barry Pearl.
Brooke.
Nice to meet you too.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on. There's a ton of things that I'm excited to talk about with you. And yeah, thanks for saying yes.
You're very welcome.
So first off, how does a person like you, because you've done so much in your career, how does a person like you start out? How did you get started into where you are today?
So I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, and my folks had been separated when I was 10 months old and divorced by the time I was a year old.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the first of what became 5 grandchildren of my grandparents. And so I was an only child and the first. And so I was raised by my mother and my 3 aunts and my grandmother. And they were always very encouraging. There was always music playing on the Victrola, the RCA Victrola, which I have to this day with 78s.
Wow.
You know, long before your time.
Oh yeah.
There's always music. There's always music going on. And by the way, if you hear that in the background, it's my gardener. So
no, that's fine.
Lower, so
that's
so
fine.
Yes, I have a gardener. I'm fortunate enough to have a gardener. So is that a status thing, having a gardener, I wonder? But anyhow,
No.
so my mother had enrolled me in a tap dancing class when I was about, I guess, 6, 7 years old. And at the end of every year, they would do a review. Mm-hmm. And I was the youngest little boy, and they took me and this youngest little girl by the name of Maxine Gilman, and they put us together, and they kind of would build the review around the two of us. And I guess I'd done that 2 years in a row, 2 or 3, and that was kind of the bug that bit me. And eventually, through my mother, and again, you know, she wasn't a stage mother. She wasn't pushy. She and my aunts, especially my Aunt Rose, who was the oldest of the 4 sisters, my Aunt Rose, my mom, and then my Aunt Frida and my Aunt Mildred. Yeah. They were always very encouraging, and I liked to sing, and you know, they thought, well, let's see what we can do to help support it. And so my mother got me involved in a community theater group there called the Lancaster Little Theater. So I did a couple of productions there, and then did 2 productions at the Franklin and Marshall College, which is a college that's known for its medical program. But they also had a terrific theater department too that Treat Williams, may he rest in peace, had gone to, and the late Roy Scheider, who starred in Jaws, if you remember. He was the sheriff in Jaws. So I'd actually done a production of Richard III with Roy Scheider, may he rest in peace, playing Richard. And then I did another play for them called Tall Story. So I'm in the community, in the theater community there in my hometown. And along comes an audition for a play that was going to be done at the Fulton Opera House, which is now known as the Fulton Theater, one of the oldest theaters in our country. And they were doing a production of Dark at the Top of the Stairs, which I think was William Inge, an Inge play. And I auditioned for, and back then auditioning is I was kind of one of the only 2 kids in the city that did this kind of thing in a way, and at the time. So I would always get the gig. So auditioning was oh, they just want to see me, and I'll probably start rehearsal the next day. And basically that was kind of it. So I got cast in this production of Dark at the Top of the Stairs. And there was a fellow by the name of Chuck Miller, Charles E. Miller, who was an aspiring playwright who lived in New York, who took a job with this show running lights. Because look, he had to pay the rent. He was an aspiring playwright, wasn't making a big living with writing plays. So he came to run the lights. And he took a liking to me and my mom and us to him. And I was kind of always looking for daddy, if you will, even though my father was alive and lived in Philadelphia, but I hadn't been in touch with him for many years, my
Mhm.
father, that is.
Right.
So Chuck said to my mom, one of these days, I'm going to get your son on Broadway. Now, that was in 1959. So 1961 rolls around 2 years later, and my mother hears from Chuck Miller
Oh,
saying that he was a friend of the secretary of the man who produced Bye Bye Birdie, which was
oh,
the first rock musical, if you think about it.
yeah.
And he came to learn that the young boy playing Randolph McAfee, Johnny Borden, was leaving the show to do another Broadway show called Milk and Honey, and hence was going to leave that role open to be cast,
Yeah.
the role of Randolph McAfee. He called my mom to say, I've got him an audition, bring him into New York. So this was like the next day. We took a train into New York, and we stayed, well, I think at first we stayed at a hotel, and Chuck took me down to the Lambs Club, which is kind of like the Friars Club. It was a
Hmm.
theater club, if you will, and
Yep.
taught me the song, There's No Business Like Show Business.
Hmm.
And the following day, I had an audition for Bye Bye Birdie in front of Marge and Gower Champion. Gower Champion directed it. Marge was his wife and dancing partner. They were a very, very famous duo.
Hmm.
And I got the gig
Wow.
and started rehearsal the next day.
Wow.
And so that began my professional career. So I did the last month of Bye Bye Birdie on Broadway with
Hmm.
Gretchen Weiler, Gene Rayburn, Dick Gautier, who was the original Birdie. But, Gretchen had
Yeah.
replaced Cheetah Rivera as Rosie in the show, and Gene Rayburn had replaced Dick Van Dyke. And then we did the last month, also worked with Paul Lynde, who played my father in that, and did the last month. And then we went out on the road. Gene Rayburn was replaced by a gentleman named Dick Patterson.
Hmm.
And that's important to note because many, many years later, Dick Patterson would come to play the role of Professor Rudy in the movie Grease. He's the one with the little bow tie that
Yeah.
is marking people out during the dance, or not marking them out, but taking their names. And when he asks Frenchie and me, who are these two, referring to Zuko and Sandy, I say Fred and Ginger, like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers.
Hmm.
So that and there are lots of webs like that that have woven into that, which is the history of my life. Just these kind of cool little magical, mystical things. So I went out on the road with Birdie. That was the fall of 61 into the winter and spring of 62. And then did the Las Vegas version of Bye Bye Birdie right after that. And basically, we had moved to New York like literally overnight. And then subsequently auditioned for the pre-Broadway show of Oliver. Didn't get it because I had a cast in my arm at the time. I fell off my cousin's Shetland pony
Oh,
and broke my arm.
yeah.
But before they came into New York, they were replacing a couple of kids, and I auditioned again. And this was actually after I'd auditioned for the road company, the national tour of Camelot, and got it,
Hmm.
playing Tom, the young boy who comes in at the end of the play, and got it. But then before I went down to sign my contracts, I had this call back for Oliver and got it. So it was coming back to New York and opening on Broadway, brand new Broadway shows. So we took it and not the Camelot. And so did Oliver on Broadway, and then the rest, as they say, is history. So that's how I started out, basically, this desire to sing and dance,
Wow.
and a family that supported me
Yeah.
in following my bliss.
Yeah. So you've done a lot of performing for years, but you're most known for playing Doody in Grease.
Yes.
So Grease is a movie that like a lot of people know. My generation was introduced. I think my generation probably got more introduced to it because of the Grease Live happening in
Ah,
2016. Um but what was your like backstory of getting involved into such a big hit movie?
well, I had done the play, first of all, the national tour, and that's a whole story in and of itself. I was going to Carnegie Mellon University at the time.
Mhm.
And in the summer of 1972, the summer before my senior year, my girlfriend and I at the time got jobs with the Chicago Free Street Theater, which was a theater company that brought original productions into the streets, basically, of Illinois
Mm-hmm.
from north to south. Brought theater to people who had never even been exposed to theater before. We'd travel in this huge showmobile. It was a tractor trailer that would, the side of which would open up and become the awning of the stage. And then we, the cast, would erect the stage, these huge rectangular panels with legs on them. So we were both cast and crew. So, and we would play affluent neighborhoods and we played squalid neighborhoods. Again, there was no discrimination. It was all free to people. So I took that gig in the summer of 72. In that company, I befriended a fellow named John Lansing, who subsequently, when we were through with the street theater and I went back to college to finish my senior year, the second half of my senior year, because I was given credit for the first semester of my senior year, since the street theater was taking us not only up and down Illinois, but it took us all over Yugoslavia and to Paris and to Brussels. So the school thought, well, this was good. I did it basically overseas.
Wow.
And so I came back and I finished up my senior year in 1973. And there were these fellow students who were transfer students from a college in California who would tell me how much I reminded them of their friend, Michael Lembeck. We would be in the same plays, play the same roles. And so it turns out that when I went back to school to finish my senior year, John Lansing went off and became the general understudy in the national tour of Grease, of the stage play Grease, the musical. And when it came through Pittsburgh, which is where I was going to school, we got in touch with each other. And I don't remember, Brooke, exactly how we did that, because that was before cell phones. Yeah. I can still remember myself on a pay phone talking to him, but I don't know how he let me know. He knew that I was in Pittsburgh. He sought me out somehow, I suppose. Anyhow, he invited me down to see Grease. I said, okay, fine. So I went down to see the play, and out on stage comes this guy, Michael Lembeck, who my friends at school told me how much I reminded them of. And he was playing the role of Sonny. Uh-huh. And he comes out backwards, complaining about the fact that he got old lady Lynch for English. Again, she hates my guts. And then when he turns around and I saw him, it was like I was watching myself. He does look like me and sound like me and act like me, wow. Although I sound and act like him. He was at the time, he's a very successful director, but a superior performer. Yeah. And I thought, my gosh, I could do this show. So I got on the phone with my agent the next day and I said, you got to get, I'm in Pittsburgh, understand, still finishing up my senior year. I said, you got to get me an audition for this, a general audition, just to get me in their files, which my agent did. So about a week or so later, I guess it was, I found myself in New York at a general audition. Wow. And auditioned for Pat Birch, who was the choreographer of the stage play, as well as the choreographer of the film and the director of Grease too. And we had worked together in 1966 and 1967 in the Boston company of You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. So she was familiar with my work.
Nice.
So I did that general audition. And the next thing you know, I don't know how many weeks afterwards, I get a call from my agent saying they want you to come back into New York for a callback because the company is in Toronto and Michael Lembeck at the end of the first act, which is when they, in the play, when they do We Go Together at the end of the first act, jumped off of a bench and broke his ankle.
Oh.
And they want you to come up immediately to Toronto to, I guess, either, you know, go on for him or to understudy the understudy. And I said, that's great. So I went back into New York and I auditioned again for the callback and I got the gig. They wanted to take me right away. And I said, folks, I have 2 weeks left of my senior year to finish. They said, all right, you finish those 2 weeks. We'll keep our understudy on. And then you'll join us in Detroit, because by that point they'd be in Detroit. And that's what I did. And for 3 weeks up in Detroit, I learned the role of Sonny. So that if anybody else went down that the understudy covered, that understudy would go on for them, and then I'd slip into the role of Sonny. That's how they were covering themselves. So I worked very hard. Now, in that production, you had Mary Lou Henner, who was the star of Taxi, playing Marty.
Wow.
You had Jeff Conaway, may he rest in peace, who was playing Zuko at the
Mm.
time, and he was a wonderful Zuko. In fact, in my life, he was my Zuko. We grew up together in New York, and he was
Uh,
that guy. He was
yeah.
brilliant. He was really a terrific Zuko, and
Mm.
he had understudied Barry Bostwick in New York
Mm.
in the role of Zuko. And you had Travolta playing Doody. Johnny played Doody at the time, but Doody in the play is different from Doody in the film, and I'll get
Yeah.
into that in a second. And a fellow named Jerry Zaks was playing Kaniki. Jerry has since gone on to become a very successful director, stage
Yeah.
director. I studied really hard the role of Sonny, and I would perform in the wings while they were doing their thing on stage. And I really worked hard. And I went to Jerry Zaks one day and I said, "Hey, listen, could you call out sick so that the understudy was, who was on for Sonny, Tommy Gerard, he would go
Right.
on for Kaniki?" And then I said, he said, "Well, let me ask the stage managers." And I said, Okay." Of course, he came back and said, "No." They said no. I said, Okay." Well, a couple of days later, which was May 19th of 1973 at this point.
Wow.
May 19th, a Saturday morning, I get a call from the stage manager saying, "Jerry Zaks is sick. You're going on as Sonny today."
Wow.
Now, they may have had it all set up and just didn't want me to be part of the ruse. That's what I can tell you. So that day, May 19th of 1973, in Detroit, I stepped on stage in the role of Sonny. 4 years to the day later, May 19th of 1977, I landed the role of Doody in the film.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's that story. So I went on then to go on that one time, and then Lembeck came back and finished the tour up until it came to California, which is where he lived, and he left the show. They called me, and I went in and replaced him in the role of Sonny for the last 10 and a half months of the first national tour, which is when Michael Lembeck came in. I beg your pardon, Michael Tucci
Wow.
came into the picture. Michael came up to Toronto because we had done 8 months in Toronto after they were here in Los Angeles. They actually
Mm.
flew me out, and I did the last matinee at the Schubert Theater out here just to get me primed and ready to then move on to Chicago, where again, like I say, I did it for 8 months.
Right.
And then we went off to Toronto and did it for the last two and closed that production. So that's when Tucci came in to understudy all the other roles, not Sonny, not my role, but I think Kaniki and Roger.
Mm.
Uh, those were the main two, and I think that was it.
Wow.
So that ended in 73. So that was my introduction to the stage play. So we had that
Mm.
going on. Now,
Right.
that said, when the film came around, they were saying we don't want to see anybody had done the play because we
Yeah.
were way too old at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow or other, produced it, may he rest in peace, said, "No, I want to see Michael Tucci, and I want to see Barry Pearl, and I want to see Jeff Conaway." And we wound up getting those roles. Now,
Wow.
again, the role that I'm playing in the film of
Mm-hmm.
Doody is
Right.
really like the role of Sonny in the play. And
Yeah.
Michael, who's playing Sonny, is really doing Roger from the play. And Kelly Ward, who's playing Putsy, is really doing Doody from the play. So it got all conjured up. They liked the name Putsy. So, they got rid of the role of Roger. And of course, we don't sing the songs in the movie that, well, actually, the character of Sonny didn't have his own song.
Mm-hmm.
But the role of Roger, the role that paralleled Tucci Sonny, has a song called Mooning, which you hear in the background during the dance contest. And
Yeah.
Magic Changes is sung by Doody, which again would have been Kelly Ward's role as Putsy. That's playing in the background too during the dance.
Wow.
So they didn't have us do those. Because really the movie was focused more on John and Olivia and Stockard and Jeff. And we totally understood that. It was unfortunate, but we understood. We got it. So that's basically in a nutshell, the Grease saga.
No, I love that. That's a great story.
Of course, then Dee Dee and I were called in to do Grease Live, if you recall.
Yeah.
She played the role of Vi, which it was just brilliant casting
Yeah,
because here she is with Carly Rae,
exactly.
what's her name, Carly Rae Jepsen,
Yeah.
playing Frenchie, and she's doing what Joan Blondell did. That was brilliant. Of course, they created the role that I did, which is the role of the producer who gets Rydell High to be the high school that's featured in the National Bandstand, I guess is what it was. So, but
Yeah.
very cool things, little Easter eggs is what we call those.
That is cool. What was that like actually like going back to something that, you know, is so, so special to you? Like back in
Well,
2016.
yeah, it was very special. And remember when we did the table reading at where did we what studio were we at? I can't remember even what studio. It was the Warner Brothers. Huh, I don't remember. I'm sorry, but at the studio, we all the entire cast sat around reading the script, and when it was done, I broke into tears, and they thought I was upset about something, when in fact they were tears of joy. And I
Mm,
thought, what a great job you've all done here with this writing, and it's just such a wonderful homage to the original stage play,
yeah.
and incorporating, of course, the film. I was just so emotional, so touched by the whole thing. So yeah, it was a real gift. Tommy Kail, who also
Hmm.
directed Hamilton, hugely successful Hamilton.
Hmm.
He's just a brilliant man, and the people that he surrounded himself with, Seth Rudinsky, I always get his last name wrong, the technical advisor, the way he designed the race and the sets, and the way the camera moved and such, just complete brilliance. It
Yeah.
was the first time that one of those stage plays, when they'd done Sound of Music, they'd done Peter Pan and
Right.
others. Hairspray, of course, came after us, but it was the first time that one of those kind of really worked, because it was the first time you had a live audience, so you were
Hmm.
able to hear the applause,
Yeah.
and it was just done so well. So it was a real gift and an honor to have been a part of that, indeed.
So, what was your favorite scene to film in the movie? Or like, was there something that you would like to share that people might not know about Greece?
We've talked about it so much that I'm sure that people that have seen me in podcasts before and have heard these very same stories, because how when I'm going to change it up, make it a fishtail.
Exactly.
It just is what it is. There isn't any one specific thing. Summer Nights was great because it was the first musical number we did, and to dance on those bleachers, that was really cool to do that.
Oh yeah.
First time in front of, um, I'd never, I shouldn't say I'd never done this before, but we sing to playback. So they have these huge speakers. So it's like karaoke kind of, but we're dubbing ourselves,
Oh yeah.
but doing it on that grand scale was very cool. And then Grease Lightning was great because of the transformation that happens
Mm.
in that studio that was all white. Everything was white. It was just assaulting when you walked into that studio.
Wow.
And then something that I'd always wanted to do was fly. I'd always
Oh.
wanted to do that. Well, we flew at the end of Beauty School Dropout. We flew Kelly and I fly a cruise across, and Michael comes down. I'd always wanted to do that. It was the most uncomfortable thing I've ever done.
Wow.
Yeah, because the rig that they had to hoist this up was, they kind of designed it themselves, and it wasn't like a professional rig at the time that we would have gotten if they had hired the company Flying by Foy, who would
Yeah.
do all of Kathy Rigby's Peter Pans.
Mm.
And anytime you'd see somebody fly, it was Flying by Foy. Now it's a different company, but they're professional rigs that have harnesses and that take the weight off your nether regions. Well, these rigs didn't do that, so it was highly uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So that the dance, it was brutal. We were working inside of a gym that wasn't air conditioned. It had they'd have to close the windows so they wouldn't hear any sound outside. So it was very hot, and there was a meat processing plant right next door. So when they would open the windows in between takes, you'd have that smell wafting through. So it wasn't very pleasant. But the end product, when you look back on it, I mean, all the work that went into that dance contest, you sit back and wow, what a
Yeah.
feat. So that was kind of cool in retrospect. It was hard to do,
Yeah.
but it was really neat in retrospect. Um, what else? Just every day was a labor of love. It was
Yeah.
shot, I contend it was a 15-week process. Kelly says that it was more like 12 or 13 with 2 weeks of post-production. I don't fully recall, but I know
Mm-hmm.
it was that whole summer of 77 that we were working from like June, July up through September. And
Yeah.
again, it was great to be working on the Paramount lot. We had rehearsed the numbers and the scenes for about 3 weeks before we
Oh
went
wow.
to principal photography. And at the end of that 3 weeks, we actually performed it for everybody that was working on the Paramount lot at that point, which
Wow.
included Jack Nicholson, who was there doing the movie Going South,
Mm-hmm.
um, Michael Landon, the late Michael Landon, who was doing Little House on the Prairie, and all kinds of celebs and dignitaries came to see us perform. It was very, very cool. Yeah. So there's that.
Yeah, I love that. So
Yeah.
you and the cast are really, you guys are still really close.
Yes, we are.
So I know that you guys were close to Olivia. Um, what was it like to work with someone that is like such a powerhouse?
Well, she herself made that so easy by not walking around like she was a powerhouse.
Yeah,
She was one of us right from the very
yeah,
beginning.
of
Um,
course.
an authentic. What you saw is what you got with her. She was a very caring and empathetic soul, and much of it is manifest. Excuse me, was manifest in is manifest in her wellness center that she created in Melbourne, the
Hmm.
Olivia Newton-John Wellness Center, which is attached to Austin Health, and they do cancer research.
Yeah,
So that became her legacy. It just goes to show you where her heart and head were at, and always were, to be able to give back to
hmm,
a community, a global community that was so good to her, you know
right.
and that she was so good to, and it was cyclic because she create this wonderful work, and then
Yeah,
people would enjoy that and they would support her, and then she'd write more, and then she'd do interviews, and she again built the center. So she made her work pay off, big time.
yeah,
So yeah, so it was great. I mean, she was so available to us, just treating her like a human being,
yeah,
and we were in awe of her, and at the same time she was like a sister. So,
yeah,
it was great in that way. It's funny, people through the years, so many people have asked us about any sordid details, and it really wasn't that.
yeah,
We just kind of just it was a big party, but and by that I mean it was a working party,
right.
and there were no egos. Everybody got along, and it's manifest in what you see. I've always contended that I think the greatest appeal, especially for people that can't articulate why they like the movie, but they know they do,
Yeah,
mainly non-pros that aren't technically, you know, um,
right.
geared, if you will. They,
Hmm.
they walk away loving it. Let me ask you, Brooke,
Yeah.
what do you think is at the core of why you and so many people love this film? What is it at the essence of it? Forgive me for putting you on the spot, but
No, that's
I'm
fine.
curious. What do you think it is?
I think it's like the music, especially. I do a lot of performances, and a lot of my songs are from Greece, and they have a story to it. They connect to it. I think that's one reason. And then also like the chemistry in the movie, it's real.
It's what I call the camaraderie.
Yes.
Y'all love seeing, you know who the Radio City Rockettes are?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you see them kicking at the same time,
Yeah.
they, or any line like that, it gets applause. When you see 30 disparate egos
Yeah.
working together,
Right.
you get a kick out of that. Well, here
Yeah.
you see all of these characters digging on each other
Mm-hmm.
like a big family. Families have
Yeah.
fights, families make up, but you
Yep.
see us getting along. And the musical number that manifests that is We Go Together, which, of course, in the film they placed at the end of the film.
Mm-hmm.
And in the play, it's at the end of the first act and then at the end of the second act as well,
Yeah.
right after what has become You're the One That I Want, which used to be a song called All Choked Up.
Oh wow.
Yeah, which was, I loved it. they didn't care if it was an homage to the song All Shook Up,
Hmm.
but I loved it. It was terrific. But it was changed to You're the One That I Want, which I'll tell you a story about that in a second.
Yeah.
But my contention is that when the masses see these characters getting along so well,
Hmm.
they dig it at
Yeah.
their core. I think that has been what is I think the essence of why it's been so successful throughout the generations.
Yeah.
Dee Dee says, it's about the first kiss, the first date, the first car, the first whatever. And there are a lot of firsts in the film. There's something about that too that we
Hmm.
can all relate to. But I
Yeah.
think deeper than that, for my money, it's that you're digging on us digging each other.
Yeah.
You know, with
Yeah.
uh, with You're the One That I Want, by the way, that wasn't originally in the plan.
Right.
And like I say, we rehearsed for 3 weeks, all of the numbers and the dances and the scenes that we were going to be doing. And when we got out to the carnival on this one particular day, they came to us and said, "We have a new song, and Pat's going to choreograph it on the fly right here.
Yeah.
And you're going to learn it on the fly right here.
Wow.
It's called You're the One That I Want." Who, honey? What? So that was all done in like a day.
Wow.
As I recall, I think they shot it pretty much, or maybe two, because Randall had to storyboard it right away, and everybody was kind of chucking and jiving, and it became what it became. Because again, they never cared for that one song, All Choked Up, which I believe we didn't. That wasn't in the piece. We didn't rehearse it, so it
Hmm.
was always going to be "We Go Together." I think I'd have to go back and look at the script, but that's how You're the One. So we're not really singing on that number. That's us
Yeah.
lip syncing. Later on, I think we went into the studio and we then did do You're the one, ooh, honey, which you see us, when I'm there with the dog.
Yeah.
So that's, and I so dislike that shot because I'm over articulating
Hmm.
because it wasn't me singing. It was just weird. But so that's the story of that particular number and how that was introduced to us and ultimately got into the movie and became a huge success. And now
Oh,
it's in every stage play that's done now. In fact, I just directed a production of it last summer, and
wow.
we used that and Hopelessly Devoted, which wasn't in the play either, for that matter.
Mm, that's such a good song too.
It is.
So I asked some of my listeners on the podcast to submit some questions, and I have two that got selected, and one of them was, where was Grease filmed?
So Los Angeles,
Hmm.
and there were three high schools. There was Venice High, which is what opens the film. We go from animation into, and I want to say that Summer Nights was done on their bleachers.
Gotcha.
And then we worked at Marshall, which is where the carnival was done. And I want to say that we might have done the dance. The dance. There was one other, and I always forget which one it is. But there were three high schools that were used, and then the drive-in sequence. I believe it was at the Van Nuys Drive-In, which is no longer.
Hmm.
And then neighborhoods in and about. Of course, the LA riverbed became Thunder Road
Yeah.
as well, so that's still around. We recently went back to Venice High.
Oh.
Um, yeah, because we were shooting a documentary
Hmm.
that has been in the making for the last couple of years. A wonderful woman named Lisa Downs,
Hmm.
along with Randall Kleiser, our director. They've been following us around all over the world. And so they've been to Liverpool with us, to Manchester, and different places in the States. And we're about to go back to Australia. I've become aware because I'm helping to coordinate it with our wonderful representative Mary Wilson of Koala Bear Promotions. She's brought us to Liverpool and brought us to, not did I say Manchester? Brought us to Liverpool and Scotland, and
Gotcha.
not Manchester, Scotland. And she's brought me to Australia a couple of times to do some of their Comic Cons, which they call supernovas.
Wow.
And now she's bringing us back again for in October, I believe it is, called the Bendigo Con, which is a toy convention of some sort. So they want me and my two Grease compadres. Oh, the question from your listener was what once again? What did they ask?
Where was
Yes. Oh,
Grace.
yeah. So
Yeah.
yes. I don't know how I got there.
That's
I was saying that this documentary that's being shot.
yeah.
We went to Venice High, and everything's changed, especially where the bleachers were,
Yeah.
because we were trying to recreate the moment when Tom Chisholm, Lorenzo Lamas,
Yeah.
sticks his foot into his helmet, and
Mm,
there's a whole story about that. And
wow.
where we were seated originally were the last bleachers on that particular side,
Wow.
and how that, in reference to where Tom Chisholm was on the diagonal. Well,
Hmm.
now it seems like the end of those bleachers was further to the right. I said, well, this is weird because now Tom Chisholm wouldn't have been over there. He'd be like right there. What?
Right.
Well, we turned out they extended the bleachers through the years. They did a whole renovation of the school. So, but anyhow, the point is that we went back to visit there, and I had produced a behind the scenes for ITV years ago when we went to the different locations, and we went down into the LA riverbed, but not where it was where we had access. It was some other place, because a lot of that's closed off now. And that wonderful bridge you saw in the background during Thunder Road, that's gone now.
Yeah.
They'd taken that down. So a lot of that has changed. But yeah, so all in and around Los Angeles, it was all done in LA, all shot.
Wow. And the last question from the listeners was, what was it like to work with John Travolta?
Boy, is he a pain in the neck. I swear I'll never work with him again. That's the kind of thing that gets cut out, and then that's with, oh, Barry Pearl doesn't. That's what TMZ is going to say. No, listen to the whole clip. Watch the whole clip. He's
Yep.
a dream. He is a dream of a human being. To
Yeah.
this day, again, we're all in touch, and he's another one that walks the talk.
Yeah.
What you see is what you get with John. Um, a guy that really comes from his heart.
Hmm.
Uh, been through an awful lot in his life. Has handled his celebrity with aplomb. He just has it so going on. I mean, a real role model,
Oh yeah.
for everyone, I would say, from kids to adults. Just the way he comports himself, the ethical individual that he is, the loving and caring individual he is. And like I said, we worked with him in the stage play when he was, just Johnny Travolta, an up and comer. And he had it going on then. He's a very lovable individual, very easy to get next to. So it was great. Again, there were no divas, there were no egos, not
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
It was a joy. And so, again, I say through the years that people want the dirt. There was no dirt. Every once in a while, Jeff Conaway, may rest in peace, his portable dressing room would be rocking back and forth a little bit because he was enjoying the pickings, if you will. Sometimes he had some little things going on with one or two of the young ladies, but that was about as sordid as it got, quite honestly.
Yeah. So we're gonna switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about your work on Broadway. You've done, like you said, Bye Bye Birdie, The Producers, A Teaspoon Every 4 Hours, Baby It's You. So what has it been like to work on material that is written versus material that like originating?
Okay, so um, the first one of those would have been Oliver. And I
Yeah.
was very young at the time. I guess I was 12 and 13 years old. And the technique at the time that I was uh, tapping into that was totally instinctual because I really hadn't studied.
Yeah.
I mean, tap dance and some vocal training, but not a lot. And even through
Hmm.
the years, not a lot. And I regret that. I regret that I didn't follow up on the training. Training is what it's all about,
Yeah.
and the study is what it's all about. It wasn't until really that I went to college that I started to dig a little deeper.
Hmm.
So creating the role that I did in Oliver, I was one of the workhouse boys in one of Fagin's gang, and I understudied the role of Charlie Bates. And the guy playing Charlie Bates understudied the Artful Dodger. So anytime he'd go on for the Dodger, or if he was out sick, and that was just a couple of lines.
Yeah.
there were distinctions between the workhouse boys and Fagin's gang. The workhouse boys were the orphans, and the Fagin's gang, they were little thieves. So there were distinctions. Again, we all kind of were working off of our instincts for the most part.
Yeah.
Not even realizing that we were creating something new. And understand that I came into the show after it had been rehearsed and was on the road, and they would, rehearse me into the role. So I was recreating something that was already created. But it was the first original Broadway show I did.
Wow.
Birdie wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
I brought my own thing to it based on like who I am, and again, my instincts at work.
Yeah.
There's a lot of deep, digging, theater character study that went into it.
Yeah.
So the next Broadway show I did then was A Teaspoon Every 4 Hours. That was original, and that was a disaster. We previewed for 3 months, 90 some odd previews, opened and closed.
Wow.
It was awful. Unfortunately, it was a great time. I had a great time, rest in peace, with Jackie Mason.
Yeah.
And the cast was great. I had a great time. And we, instead of going out on the road, we did it all in New York at the Anta Theater, which is no longer. And I don't remember exactly much character study with that. It was just me and being able to expose me. That's a craft in and of itself, certainly. But there wasn't a whole lot of digging there. Where again, there probably could have been, hadn't been to school to Carnegie yet. So, even though I was like 19 years old, 18, 19 years old, I still should have known better. But that was because I wasn't studying in New York. And I highly encourage studying. And then went off to school and learned all, kinds of things about character study and such. And so not that necessarily came a whole bunch to play post-college, because then I did Grease, and all I had to do, the play, was do what Michael Lembeck did, because he was the master of that character as far as I was concerned. I didn't have to go very far. That said, there is a technique to being able to imitate, and then once I do that, then it becomes my own. So I work from the outside in, inside out. Kind of my technique. I will, you want me to do this there and say that then, and okay, fine, no problem. I'll motivate that. I'll get there. And then I do. And again, that's part of the craft for me, my technique. And so again, I wasn't creating, I was recreating. So the next thing, like I say, Teaspoon, don't remember much about constructing that character. I think the character's name was Barry. I think Bruce, I think the character name was. And then off to school and come back to do Lenny's Back, I want to say. Now that I dug, because that was, dug into, because that was the story, a one-man show about Lenny Bruce, the comedian Lenny Bruce, which was written by the late Sam Boberick and his widow, Julie Stein. And so I did a lot of character study there. And then we did that in New York just for a couple of performances at Studio 54 on dark days when when Cabaret with Alan Cumming was at Studio 54. So the gentleman who was a partner in running that space was also friendly with another gentleman who was friendly with Sam Boberick. And they got me into New York to do that a couple times on off nights. But then came the producers. Once again, I'm recreating, and that's Susan Stroman's work. And you had to do everything by the book with Stroman. That's how she works. She's a master at it, and she's brilliant at it. Because it ain't broke, you don't fix it. Put your hand on a flag there, and step there. It's by the numbers. I get it though, because that's how I work anyway.
Right.
So I became their general understudy in the national tour, the first national tour. But I belonged to all companies. So when Susan Stroman was filming the movie, the producers, the musical, she was pulling people out of the New York company. And when she did that, they flew me into New York to do the show there. So I did it for about 3 weeks in New York on Broadway. So it is a Broadway credit for me. Once again, I'm recreating her work and the work of the people that came before me, whose roles I was playing. So there are all kinds of different methods, and I do what I have to do to get to to achieve the goals that the creatives want me to achieve as best I can. So Baby It's You, which was unfortunately another not a disaster, but it wasn't a hit on Broadway.
Exactly.
The problem with that piece, well intentioned and originally the thought to tell the story of Florence Greenberg, who discovered the Shirelles and created the Shirelles. Great story. I played Florence's husband and a couple of other characters. So there I got to create, but again, I was recreating in a way. We don't know what her husband was really like. He wasn't much in the
Yeah.
forefront, Greenberg's husband. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so we were able to kind of create him out of the pieces that we figured, we supposed certain things. Those are the suppositions. But then I also had to play record producer. And I had friends who knew him, so they were able to help me with little tidbits of
Right.
how to behave. And then I had to listen to my director also, or their vision was Sheldon Epps and Floyd Mutrux, who created the piece to begin with, also written Million Dollar Quartet. The problem with that piece was the script, actually. It needed restructuring, and Floyd just wasn't as amenable as he needed to be to get it in. The music was amazing. Brandon Uranowitz, who's a huge star, won a Tony not too long ago.
Mm-hmm.
He played my son, and just has gone on to fame and fortune. He's a brilliant artist. He played my son in it, and of course Beth Level played my wife, and it doesn't get any better than Beth Level, I tell you.
Yeah.
Again, working there was a wonderful creative process
Right.
with the help of the creatives themselves, and so it changes from person to person and from team to team. You have to kind of go with the proverbial flow, as they say.
Out of all the experiences that you've had, what is something that you have taken away as a whole? Like what is something that you've taken away from every experience that you've had thus far and will continue?
Uh, I've always contended that the definition of a pro is not whether you're being paid. It's
Yeah.
not whether you have an agent. It's not how much study. It's not your union affiliation, but it's how you behave on the field. That makes a professional. And I do everything I can not to be the diva. And that is not to say that I don't have concerns and legitimate issues about all kinds of things, from the working conditions to opinions about what it is that I'm doing, which I discuss with my director, whose final word is the final word, because it's not a democracy.
Yeah.
It just cannot be, or else you'd have anarchy. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
And to work with your director, uh, you got to go along to get along. I know it may seem like spineless in a way, but it's not. It takes the most courage and the most spine to be able to give up your own ego, your own personal considerations about everything, and act with wild abandon. You abandon all of your consideration. Well, I would do it this way. I would like to. What you want to do doesn't mean a hill of beans. It's
Mm-hmm.
what the playwright has said about your character. It's what other characters say about your character. I think that they expose. From those three things: the playwright, other characters, and what your characters say, then you can begin to legitimately suppose certain behaviors, certain moments, certain actions based on those very real facts, not random radical choices. Well, I want to wear a big nose here. Why? Well, because I think it'll look cool. No. Is there another? Can you give me more legitimate? Oh, it says here that he has a lot of trouble blowing his nose. It's always stuffed up. Oh, okay. Well, then let me put some red on my nose, because you would suppose that the character would, those are the kind of, I know it's minute, but that's what I mean by supposition.
Yeah.
So it's not being a diva. It's being a team player, and
Yeah.
within that, maintaining your integrity, your artistic integrity, but knowing that the boss is the person or persons that are behind that desk that are directing you, whether
Yeah.
it's the musical director, the choreographer. And yeah, that's basically my takeaway from all of it, from all the years. And it's why I've been able to have amassed the body of work that I have.
Like, you not only do you act and stuff, and you've done theater, but you've also directed. So what has that been like? It's a different thing than acting, for sure.
Well, yeah, because you're sort of responsible for everything that goes on that canvas,
Yeah.
You got all these wonderful paints, and you want to cast your show so that those paints are as bright as possible, if you will. And it's a collaboration between your other creatives.
Hmm.
And it's a tough job,
Yeah.
because especially the way I do it, because and as all directors do, you really got to dig into the script and take out all the fine points and and mine everything and put it all together into larger pictures. And then along with your fellow creatives, you work together to bring a story to fruition. It's a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
And that is not to diminish the hard work that the actors and the actresses and the singers and the dancers and oh my gosh, and you're more aligned with your crew as well as a director. So,
Yeah.
they're part of your larger team. It's massive. It's daunting. It's huge, and it's a great challenge. I enjoy it a lot. I've done a bunch of it now, and would like to do more. So we'll see. There are some things in the
Yeah.
works.
So is there like any upcoming work for you?
So at the moment, I mean, the last well, the last thing that I did was an episode of Nobody Wants This. If I don't know if you watched it, it's terrific with Adrian Brody and Kristen Bell. Have you seen that series?
Yeah.
Oh, it's
And now I'm
wonderful.
gonna have
Oh,
to.
do. I believe it's on Netflix, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay.
And it's just terrific. I had a tiny, tiny little cameo in it, but that was
Yeah.
fun to do. And to work with Adrian and Kristen Bell is a delight, by the way.
Yeah.
And so is Adrian. Um, but I want to say, I can't remember if that was shot after I came back. It might have been after I came back from Australia. I can't remember offhand. But I did a month in Australia playing the role of Chambers, the counsel to the Queen, in a panto called Snow White, which
Wow.
was directed by Bonnie Lithgow, whose son Christopher Lithgow and daughter-in-law Bonnie Lithgow have the Lithgow family pantos, along with Bonnie Lithgow. And I've done several pantos through the years. A panto, based on the word pantomime, but it's not a pantomime. They take not familiar with the British form of musical. They take a fairy tale. They take like Snow White or Aladdin or Sleeping Beauty, and they'll rewrite it to infuse it with jokes that like adults get, but it's really geared to the kids. And then they take popular music and
Yeah.
they infuse it throughout. So I got to do that in Australia for a month. Upcoming, and then I came back and I directed a production of an award-winning production of Footloose, actually, at the
Mm.
Colony Theater here in Burbank, Los Angeles, California, Burbank, California. And on the books now, or on the boards now, there's nothing up at the moment. Like I say, there's this autograph signing event that's going to happen in October, and
Yeah.
I'm available if anybody has something for me.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Are there any like final words that you want to say on here? Like maybe like advice or just
I think that
something?
something that I've always suggested to people, especially people that want to follow an artistic path, is to follow your bliss. You make your dreams come true. Perseverance is very key. Don't let naysayers get in the way. Follow your path. Seek out the best people that you can rub elbows with, and continue to learn from each other, from your superior, from even the youngins growing up, because folks like yourself also are great teachers.
Yeah.
And we're always in that state of learning. So be open to that and absent yourself from your ego to be able to be available to advice, which you weigh from
Yeah.
everyone. And
Mm.
and again, just simply follow your heart
Yeah. That's a
and
perfect.
study and study and study and study. Never stop studying. And I suggest to people that are wanting a career in theater and I didn't do this in college. I wasn't academically inclined. I wasn't a really strong student after a while.
Right.
And I only wish that I had been, because I'd have studied psychology and philosophy and more histories and languages. Make sure you are a full-rounded individual, and in great part, I mean, if we're going to be playing characters, you're going to want to know what how those characters tick. So taking psychology, that helps a great deal. And I've learned a lot of psychology by teaching improvisation, especially when you become responsible for imparting information to people that are paying you money to learn. And I have found that particular process, the Viola Spolin theater game technique, has really spoken to me. And I was fortunate enough to be able to teach it for a lot of years, and I still do on occasion. And especially working with the special needs community for about 10 years. Joey Travolta, one of John's older brothers, has a company called Inclusion Films. And I was honored enough to become a part of that company for a while, and going into cities for 2 weeks at a time. There were 3 teachers, and each of us had classes of 15 to 20 people in special needs, developing a 5 to 7 minute film and a 1 minute commercial at PSA, which would then be exhibited later in the fall, along with all the other films and the interviews that Joey would do with each of the students. And I learned an awful lot because of my teaching and my study of improvisation, and also my work before in front of a camera. All of that came to play because we, the teachers, were directors of these films, and I learned so much doing that as well. All of that came to play, surprisingly, but then again, not so, because I know how to do that because I've been doing it from this end. I know what that other end looks like and feels like, done a little bit of it, but then to have to do it, I directed, scores of short films for Joey's company. Just always learning and always be the sponge.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you're on Instagram if people want to follow you, correct?
Yes, Harry_Pearl_LA. That's the Instagram handle.
Awesome.
Yeah. I don't always follow back, but I love seeing people follow. Sometimes I do, So I'm not on Facebook much these days anymore. But Instagram I am, and who knows, maybe I'll be back on Facebook when the dust settles around here a little bit.
Yeah, totally. Well, thank you so much for doing this with me. I'm so honored, and you were great to interview.
Well, you are very, very welcome, and thank you for asking me. It's an honor for me too, Brooke. And I wish you continued success with your podcasts. Continue to follow your bliss.
Thank you so much for listening and watching to My World with Stories podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. To stay up to date, you can follow My World with Stories podcast on both Facebook and Instagram at My World with Stories podcast. Make sure to give this podcast a like for future episodes coming your way. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and we will see you guys next time.